Morning. Am I on? Am I on? Hello? Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Are you on? All right, everybody, let's go ahead and grab that seat.
This is a little cheeky microphone. You might have to go toggle that. Yeah. It's the jank. I'm on the janky input.
Well, I'll go ahead and start. Good morning, everybody. This is the landmark morning for all of us here, as you've got both Brandon and I. Brandon and me, I don't know which one it is, and you can correct me later. You've got both of us here this morning, and so we're both very excited. We've talked through this several times this week, and I think we're good.
I think so too.
Okay. So for the last couple of weeks, Brandon has talked the biblical story of followership through Moses and the grumbling, the infighting, and how that ultimately led to sort of Israel's destruction. I mean, or Israel, at least postponement of the Promised Land. And so this week, what we're going to do is we're going to try to cover two different things because just because of how our curriculum is kind of set up. We're going to cover a little bit of Joseph just kind of built in to our curriculum, but we're also going to really kind of dive into a practical side of followership and what it looks like in four very specific avenues of our life. And we'll tell you what those are, so if you want to take notes, you'll be able to distinguish. We're going to go back and forth on those, but I just wanted to let you guys know kind of where we're going. And the idea is followership is a really cool idea. Like, hey, let's all get together and be like-minded and do the things, pushing together, and we're all one unit, and we've got one leader. But then kind of when you put it onto the mold of our lives, it sometimes gets a little messy. And so we kind of need to work out some of those things, and so we're going to talk about four different areas. And some of the things we're going to talk about this morning are going to get a little messy. Like, I don't know what he's going to talk about specifically, but I got a pretty gnarly one, so just get ready for that. And know that I love you, and I pray that that's returned. So with that, the four areas that we're going to talk about this morning, this is just kind of our intro, and then he's going to talk about this first one. The four areas are our spiritual citizenship, our earthly citizenship, our workplace, and in the home, and how followership weaves its way throughout those. And we're going to kind of be telling the story of Joseph a little bit with a lot of New Testament examples throughout in this morning. So with those four, those are going to be the four things that we talk about with followership this morning.
Oh, are we doing the hand?
Yeah, this is
we're
it.
doing this. Okay,
Yeah,
all right.
yeah,
Cool.
that wasn't a joke. Like,
Okay.
It sounded like a joke, but
Awesome.
finger guns.
Well, good morning, everybody. Good to see everybody here. Like he said, we're going to go through these four things, and we just kind of drew. I got the evens, I guess. So A, I guess that's, yeah. So A, B, AC, I have AC.
AC.
Good, because I was
Yes.
like really concerned this morning. I walked in that I'd messed this up, and we were going to have a lot of the same
You're
stuff.
good. No, that's
Okay,
it.
good. So I have AC. So A being spiritual citizenship. And one thing I wanted to mention last week, and sometimes I'm bad about this. I get like a little too granular, and I kind of miss the overall big picture of things, and that this followership thing is ultimately an expression of our faith. Like, that's what it really is overall. And so I kind of miss the overall big picture of a lot of stuff. I get too hard into the rules and to the inner workings of things. And so I just wanted to lay that out there. Is that helped me kind of realize a little bit over it, that it's expression of our faith, and that these four things are just some areas of concentration to help us really nail that down. And the foundation of this followership, and especially of this first one that we're going to talk about, and we'll filter through all the other ones, is that really this followership is found in obedience and submission. And so two different things that are very similar, and we'll talk about those later, but that's kind of how I wanted to start out, that all these are rooted and balled up in those couple things. So first thing, spiritual citizenship. So we have all these spheres of responsibility, right? And we're going to talk about them being in workplace, being in home, how we interact in this world, our spheres of leadership. But if you have spheres and certain ones fall under it, the spiritual citizenship is the big sphere. And all the other little spheres are the ones that trickle out from underneath it, the subset spheres, if you will. Peter and the apostles in Acts 5:9 said we must obey God rather than men. I think we all understand and probably agree with that. But the big one when we talk about citizenship, verse-wise, is Philippians 3:17 through 21. If somebody has their Bible handy, swipe up or actual physical paper, that'd be awesome too. Anybody? Philippians 3:17 through 21. And this is something we've all grown up with, heard our whole lives, but there's an important part in it that I often forget that I want to kind of buzz through again.
Join with others and follow my example, brothers, and take note of those who live according to the pattern we gave you. For as I have often told you before, and now say again, even with tears, many live as enemies of the cross of Christ. Their destiny is destruction, their God is their stomach, and their glory is in their shame. Their mind is on earthly things, but our citizenship is in heaven, and we eagerly await a Savior from there, the Lord Jesus Christ, who, by the power that enables him to bring everything under his control, will transform our lowly bodies so that they will be like his glorious body.
Thank you. Okay, so obviously the big one in that section there is verse 20. And this is something we've read our whole lives, but our citizenship is in heaven. We eagerly await a Savior from there in the Lord Jesus Christ. So obviously he says we are citizens of heaven. It's not something that we are, someday we'll be citizens of heaven, but we are citizens of heaven now. I don't know, could you watch the clock too? I'm just going to get going here.
You're good.
Okay, cool.
I'll
We tried to break this up in like little minute segments here. I have no idea where I'm at, so.
You're good.
Okay. So if who's traveled internationally in here before? Okay, the first time I traveled internationally was we got married. Rebecca said, you are, but she didn't say this, but it was implied. I am like pretty kind of uncultured, I guess. Growing up in small town Oklahoma, never been out of the country before. And, obviously I was like, honeymoon, it'd be cool. I'm gonna leave the country, go somewhere other than Galveston. So, because that was my extent of beaches, all right? So we headed out. And so the first time, you land and you go through customs, what happens? You walk up to the guy and he just stares at you because you're a foreigner, right? And it's just really unnerving. Like, at that point that you are not a citizen. You already know it to begin with. But when you walk up there and you feel like you're being studied and interrogated for not being a citizen, it really, really hits home. And so contrast that is totally different than whenever you return back home. Whenever we return back home and I'm coming through, I can't remember where we were. It was, probably Houston. We walk through internationally and it's, hey, I'm home. Like, they don't know that I'm American just by looks, but I already feel different walking through this checkpoint as to the other one. As Paul was talking to Philippi, historically Philippi was a Roman colony. And so what comes with being a Roman colony, if you're born there, you got to experience all these awesome benefits of being a Roman citizen. So, you get to vote. You get to, if you wanted to, sue. You didn't get just immediately stoned or beaten. You got a trial. So you got all these great things back in the ancient world, and Philippi was just this, metropolis of thought and thinking. Big road leads in, gorgeous cathedrals, theaters. It's just this, just an amazing place. And so you have these Romans there. So Paul's talking to him, and he's saying, and in context-wise, I didn't really realize this and how much we can relate to this, but you have this, this culture, and you have all these things, all these benefits. And so Paul says to them, just, you're Romans, you have all this great stuff, but don't forget your citizenship. I think a lot of times we can probably agree that we fall into that. I mean, just look at what is around us right now, like where we grow up and what we grow up in and what we're raising our families in. And it's just really comfortable, really easy. And so whenever I read something like that when Paul's talking to them, I say, man, I kind of feel that a little bit too. Mm-hmm. And so it's just an awesome reminder in this. It is, obviously we know our citizenship is in heaven, but it's not thinking along the lines of, it's someday I will be a citizen. It's something that I am aspiring to be. It's something that I already am and already living, and something that I'm running towards.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Somebody can turn to 1 Peter 2, 13 through 17. We're going to read that here in just 1 second. Part 2B of this is our earthly citizenship. We have several examples of like I said, we're going to talk about Joseph. Joseph was sold into slavery, then was in jail, then did some stuff with some dreams, then became the right hand of Pharaoh, second in command in all of Egypt. I could not make that I couldn't truncate that any more than I just did.
That's pretty good.
So he had to have followed Egyptian laws to get where he was. That doesn't exclude him from following God, because what you said is, our heavenly citizenship comes before everything else. Like everything else comes through that. And so that's what we get here. Somebody want to read and read loudly, because this one's a good pill to swallow. Go ahead.
Submit yourselves for the Lord's sake to every authority instituted among men, whether to king as the supreme authority, or to governors who are sent by him to punish those who do wrong and to commend those who do right. For it is God's will that by doing good you should silence the ignorant talk of foolish men. Live as free men, but do not use your freedom as a cover-up for evil. Live as servants of God. Show proper respect to everyone. Love the brotherhood of believers. Fear God. Honor the king.
You ready?
And there's a door right over there if you're going to go.
This week in the United States, there was a leaked ruling on Roe v. Wade from the Supreme Court. While everyone is getting uncomfortable with this, know that I am not going to delve too deeply into this right now. If you want my opinion on this, come talk to me afterwards. That's great. We will definitely, I'm not ashamed of it. This isn't where I'm wanting to go with this. In the realm of followership and how it falls into governmental authority, we have that's not the only instruction that there is to follow your governmental leaders, that they are appointed by God. And that's a hard pill to swallow, because I've seen some of our leaders. And I've seen the things that they've done and said and been a part of. And not current, not previous, all time, like all of them, not American leaders, just period. When we defined followership, it was it's a group movement. I thought, when I brought this up to Ziana, like, hey, I'm going to talk about this week, she was like, oh no, this is a terrible idea. In this room, in this family, there are differing opinions on every side of that ruling this week. It's not even actually a ruling yet, it was just a leak of a ruling. But there are people on both sides of the leak. There are people on both sides of this new ruling. There are people on sides of everything that is going on with that. We are still a family. If you are wanting to find a group of people that agrees with you on every aspect of everything, cult. You're looking for a cult. That's not what this is. And like I said, I am not coming down on either side of it here. What I am saying is that we have to extend an amount of grace within the family on issues like this and other issues in government where rules have come down from on high, and we have to deal with those one way or the other because we're instructed to follow those rules. And you may say, well, I'm not going to follow those rules because of my heavenly citizenship. And that's instructed. Joseph ended up in jail because of that. Daniel, we'll probably get to him later, ended up in jail because of that. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were put in a fire because of that, because if they put resistance against government authorities and leaders making rulings coming down. Be careful where we place, where we decide those hills that we're going to die on, because also alienating your family is probably not what we have in mind here either. That I'm not telling you what to think. Please, this is going to sound, this is coming out so jumbled in my head. I hate to put you on the spot, Ziana, but is this kind of what we were talking about last night? Have I said all the things that I wanted to say?
So this verse, submitting to every human authority, and so we had just kind of talked about how that would probably be an elephant in the room this week especially.
Right.
But kind of what we were discussing was we can acknowledge that there may be opinions all along the spectrum on any issue, and we can still be the body and a cohesive followership to our ultimate leader.
Yes, and that's the ultimate thing. Philippians 2, make my joy complete by being of the same mind, maintaining the same love, united in spirit, and intent on one purpose. If that's our like-mindedness, being intent on one purpose as our followership, as we have our leader and that's who we're following, then there's a lot of things that we can disagree with in the meantime. Like, I think that the Denver Broncos, the Chicago Cubs, and the Oklahoma City Thunder are the only professional sports that anyone should ever follow, and all the rest are garbage. People are probably going to disagree with me on that, and that's fine if you're wrong. But just to know that there is a spectrum. There's been several hands. I think, Zach, you were first.
We talked about this a while back, and I think it's important to talk about it often. But, the more I thought about this idea of submitting to authorities was the idea that the people that he's talking to, he had to say this because they were so wrapped up in the kingdom of heaven that they were ignoring the local authorities, which I think is an awesome problem to have.
Sure.
And that's
If you're going to err on one side.
I'm sorry?
If you're going to err on one side.
Correct, yeah. And I think that's a really interesting piece of it. And then you and I talked a little bit about the idea of being like-minded. And, being like-minded to that end is what we're supposed to be like-minded to. And to your point, being like-minded to say whatever ruling is passed down, we all have to come to some sort of an agreement, or we're no longer family, is just ignorant. And no offense to anybody, but it's not right, it's not fair, it's not what God has in mind. It's not what Jesus' last prayer in the garden was when he prayed for unity of believers. It's a different thing. Being torn asunder for anything other than the very few things that are core to our faith is absolutely contrary to what God has in mind for our family.
Yes, sir.
So our core values of loving God and our neighbors through community is really what this class is about.
Mhm.
Followership is looking at this idea that we are not just living our Christian life as individual silos, who come as individual silos into this space on Sunday, or individual silos into our small groups on whatever day that is, we're contemplating what does it look like to be the body. One of the ways that I've probably poorly described Oakdale is we're a congregation with wide guardrails to create a lot of space for a lot of different people. And a family that does that says we're not going to beat each other up over something that is more important than loving God and our neighbors. And we can have these differences, and not just difference of opinion, but differences of conviction. I mean, we can go that far. I can have a very different set of convictions about what it means to follow government or whatever, but I have to check myself in this community to make sure that the way that I'm expressing, when I'm expressing, how I'm expressing convictions don't hurt anybody, don't push anybody away. Make this a place where people feel that they will be accepted and a place they can journey along with all of us. So I think there's something really unique about what you're talking about, because we're talking about it in the context of being family.
Yeah.
Well, that was the first messy part. So we will move right on out of that.
And we could go on that for like a long time.
Yeah, if you guys want to talk about that.
Well, just this whole thing, because like this is the life that we live, is this dual citizenship thing. It is, I mean, basically our whole lives are built on these two things.
Mm-hmm.
It is, we are spiritual beings and citizens first, and then second is we have a world here. Everything else falls like within that sphere there.
Mm-hmm.
And so like what you opened up there is just, I mean, we could just, I mean, go on it, because it is really important. And I like what you said, Zach, as well. Thank you for that. And just like what John said, that we could have like a statement or conversation like that. I mean, I can remember 20, 25 years ago, 30 years ago, like wherever you were, it is like there's a community, but you have to like fall exactly within like these parameters of we think community members should be. Mm-hmm. And it's now that we can have a conversation in this followership context of that things aren't necessarily exactly like that. This isn't like as black and white as we think it is.
Correct.
So along those lines, now we're getting into like little subsets of it. So now that we are earthly citizens, there's a lot of things as earthly citizens that we have to do. One of them is how are we in our followership in the workplace? So obviously most of us in here work. Actually, all of us work. There is everything that we do that we need to get something done is work. Like a lot of times it's like, well, I go to an office or I have this job, I get paid for this. It is anything that we do that we work. Raising kids, family, anything that you have to get done is work. But this whole concept of always made me really nervous, and I've struggled with my whole life, is once I started working I have like, that's my mission field. That is my place where I've been called to go. That was what I was, as we were taught from down on. Like, this is where you express your Christian faith the most. And a lot of degrees, that's true. I mean, because look at how much you work in your life and how much time you spend with those people. So let's say that you work, the average American, 40 to 50 hours a week, 100 hours a week if you're a mother. And let's say you do that 50 weeks out of the year. Let's say we do a couple weeks for vacation. And so you do this from your mid-20s to your mid-60s, so there's 40 years. And so if you're working this year at just a normal average job where you go in and you clock out and you get paid for your hours, you're probably going to do anywhere between 2,000 to 2,500 hours this year. And so if you do that for over the life of your 40-year work, you're going to work in your life probably anywhere between 80 to 100,000 hours.
It's a lot.
In your life.
It's a big number.
Okay? So that's a lot of time that we are out in the workplace world, and a lot of time that we are spending with people that are maybe not like us. Maybe they are. That's awesome. But a lot of times they're probably not. And that's why I've really stressed about this whole following and the workplace environment. So I see the work thing with three players. I've got me, I've got my coworkers, and I've got a superior, my boss. Maybe for some of you in here, it's just two. Maybe you are the boss, and it's your coworkers. I guess it would be three, and you. And so I think there's a lot that predicates how I'm going to handle myself in the workplace as a follower. And how I do that personally affects all three of these things: myself, my citizenship, my coworkers, and then my boss. And so Colossians 3:23, do you remember that off the top of your head? It's one that we've grown up hearing. It is how we conduct ourselves in the workplace. Work hard and cheerfully at all you do, just as though you are working for the Lord and not merely for your masters. I would say today probably, I think work has always been what it is. I don't think work has necessarily got harder in the specific task that it is, but all the factors that go around with what make a job, I think it's gotten a lot more stressful. And so whenever we're talking about our followership and how we affect people at workplace, I think a lot of this, and especially going back to Joseph, is how we handle like our stress levels. Because work is getting, I think, a lot harder just because of constant communication that we have. The expectations of getting things done like right at this moment are greater than any point in my working life that I've ever experienced before. Just the expectations of when you need stuff done. So a lot of times we find ourselves stressed. We find ourselves overworked. How am I going to get all this stuff done? And then just that comes along with that, just the fact of realizing, and this took me a long time and I'm still definitely not there, that God cursed work. So he had Adam in Genesis 2 say, you're going to do all these things. You're going to tend the garden. And then you go over one more page, and now he says, because of this, work is cursed. Work will be toil. Well, guess what? We all have work in some way. Work is not easy anymore. And with that, work never ends. It doesn't stop. So tomorrow when I go into work, and this email that I supposedly cleaned out and I felt really great about, it's not going to be clean anymore. It's always going to be full. It's always going to be filled. My work will never end in that regard. And so that brings a lot of stress to me. And so I realized this last week I wasn't as open and available to a lot of teammates. And I knew that some were really struggling with stuff. And I didn't really handle it as well as I should. So I just wanted to say that is a big aspect of our lives. We all work. I know it probably weighs on a lot of us how we are, and we are missional, to this whole avenue and area. But with stress that comes with our jobs, comes a great opportunity as well.
Our last piece is going to be in the home. Somebody wants to turn over to Ephesians 5:22. Actually, if everybody wants to, I'll read this real quick. It says, "Wives, subject yourselves to your own husbands as to the Lord." Well, that's our class this week, you guys. Have a good weekend. I'm just kidding. That got exactly the eye roll from my wife that I expected. No, so it does start that way, and then in verse 25 it says, "Husbands, love your wives just as Christ also loved the church." There is a submission in the family that it goes all directions. There is a submission between a husband and wife. There is a submission between parents and children. Let's talk about the parents and children first. Obviously, the very easy one, since the kids aren't in here to argue with this, am I right? Is children submitting to their parents. I don't think that's in there. That's what we hope for. So that one's not too hard to grasp. The other side of that, and this actually came up in the previous class of covenants, and it was talking about parents having kids, and if you have children, then you are automatically entered into a covenant with them to take care of them, to sort of submit to their needs because they can't change diapers by themselves. I mean, like that as very tiny babies, like they can't. And so there is a I don't know, I'm missing the word here. Anyways, you enter into that covenant to submit back and forth, even with your kids. That does not mean doing everything that your kids ever want to. And if you guys want an example of all the things that you shouldn't do, you guys can come over and spend an afternoon with Clark. And he's very good at like trying to do all of the things that you should not be doing at this age. I mean, he's 4. It's perfectly in line for him. Between husbands and wives, there is a submission that goes both ways. And the reason that I want to bring this up is because cumulatively, as a collective unit, you still have one leader, one master, one person that we are both as a unit following. So my followership in my family kind of is circular here and is appointed. It is the Indiana Jones boulder chasing down.
Absolutely.
And so we are all together in that, and it goes all the different directions, and then we are all trying to go towards a specific goal. That one was a hard one for me to wrap my head around completely, so wrestle with that and then shoot me a text later this week about what you think about that. But the idea that followership isn't just here in this congregation, but it is within our blood nuclear families. And we all serve each other to attain our goal that we're all working towards together.
That's a good point. All right, so we started this talking about there's a couple things that our citizenships, our lives in general are built upon. Anybody remember what those 2 things were? Did I say it?
You did.
Okay,
You
good.
did. I just know because I'm also teaching the class,
Thank you.
correct?
You saw the material. Okay.
Say the question again.
There's a couple things that followership is built upon. Its foundation. There's a couple things. They're very similar too, and we're gonna unpack that just a little bit too. Yeah, way to go, Randy. So obedience and submission. So similar in a lot of ways, but there's also some key differences. I think that it's important to understand, and it's taken me a while to get there because one of them is easier for me to go to, and probably you guys too, than the other one. So what is the difference, and how are they different? Obedience and submission.
Do what you're told.
Yeah.
Submission is of the heart.
Yeah, very good.
Do you have our notes?
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, like, really,
Yeah.
It's pretty spot on.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear what she said. So
She
I'll
said,
probably
babe.
just repeat what she said, but
Oh,
I was
yeah.
going to say that obedience is an action, and submission is an attitude.
Yeah.
That's exactly. Well done. I mean, like, really, that's it.
Yeah. That is followership right there. That team
Yeah.
on the same
Yeah.
page. That's awesome.
Hive mind.
Yes, but you're right. It's one of them is it's about the condition of the heart is what makes the difference in this thing.
I was just going to bring up in our story today, older brother, it says, all these years I've slaved for you and I've never disobeyed you. So he's not disobeying his father, but his heart's still, I don't know if he's really ever submitted to him.
Good night. This is going so well.
Yeah. So what about the whole, and I think this is something that growing up within the church and as a young Christian I struggled with, and it's taken a while, and thank goodness we have time, God willing, to figure some of this out. But how about the whole obedience without submission thing? Can you have it? Is that something that we do? Is it something that we fall into? What do you think, Alan? shaking your head.
Absolutely. That's probably the common human condition, actually. It's not natural for us to submit. I mean, we can understand what, right and wrong is and be obedient to what is right. But to submit, it takes, I believe it takes a spiritual aspect of our lives in order to be able to do it.
Yeah.
I think in the first lesson, the comment was opened by, we hear a lot of different things about people saying, I don't like to be told what to do, that's just more than what I want to do, this is my choice. And so our obedience is kind of fluid. It depends on what we want to do. The submission would take care of that. I think when we're talking about the Roman rule, I don't know of anybody that would hate the Romans more than the Jews. Hated it. And for a lot of different reasons, I think that go beyond our reason for not liking our government. And Jesus said, if you have to take it a mile, take it 2 miles. And so you go beyond what you think you should do or what you're told to do. That's submission, going beyond the bare requirements. And I see, unfortunately, people saying, well, I'll pay my income tax, but I'm going to deduct my income tax by how much money we spend on defense. Okay? So I'm partially obedient to where my conscience is satisfied.
Right. I like that.
Yeah. I think obedient, obey, and comply are close in those regards. It's because whenever you do comply, it is almost like I'm making some concessions to only go like to a certain point. And when you do that, I think you're living on the edge. Like you're
Right.
living within just like some margins of where you're not able to go. And I don't think God is really interested in that at all. Like he is in the submission that the willful heart is going to go all into this thing. And so I think that when I was younger and even still now, the obeying thing, it was like, I'm just going to make sure I can do what I'm told so I can stay out of trouble. And I don't get myself where I'm not supposed to be, but that's never really served me very well at all. And so, anyways, that's where I wanted to. Yeah, Randy.
It was better said earlier, but I will forgive, but I won't forget.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You're following the letter of the law, but you missed the letter of the heart,
Yeah.
or the letter of the mind.
Mm-hmm.
So you guys have obviously nailed this. The prime example that we have specifically from the Old Testament is Saul. Saul, 1 Samuel chapter 15, if you guys want to read that entire chapter to yourself while I'm talking. Saul's told to go in and kill all of the Amalekites, everybody. And the list is kind of horrific. And this is like the rated R part because it says, kill all the men, okay, all the women, okay, children, that's a little, and then all of the animals. And you're like, all right, calm down a little bit. But that's the instruction. Saul goes into the land and kills all of the Amalekites except for the leader, and also takes all of the choice livestock animals back with him. You had one thing to do. Just kill all of it. Just wipe it clean and start over. It's what they got. That was the very specific punishment from God. So he was supposed to do that. Didn't do that. And Samuel comes to him and says, hey, you didn't do this. And he's like, I know. But, and then comes up with a reason why it was okay that he did what he did. He justified it. And that justification is, like, that's our, like, that's the precipice that you were talking about. Like, we come up to it and we go, I'll do this, but. Like, I won't, like, I can't, that's that extra little piece that I'm just not going to do. I'm just not going to, we can split this up and this is good for everybody. Everybody wins out of this situation. The Amalekites are gone. They're no longer a nation, and we get all their cool stuff. But that wasn't the instruction. And because of that, Saul no longer got to be king. Like, that's the moment that it was taken from him. And Samuel says, hey, you're not going to be king anymore. It's going to go to somebody else. And it was a matter of heart. He did almost everything that he was supposed to do. But he couldn't submit fully. He couldn't put his heart into the direction that God had for him. And because of that, the kingship was taken away.
Sure. Actually, I think I've talked more than you, probably.
It's okay.
So
I talked about
2
Roe v.
minutes.
Wade, so, like, I'm
Yeah.
good.
Say, in church, it seems like, at least when I was growing up, almost all the lessons were on obedience.
Yeah.
I didn't hear enough on submission. I really think it's hard that, whether you have little children, you're teaching them the rules, right? It's what needs to obey, but I think the hard part when we become disciples, it's not just about obeying and getting everything right. It's about submitting and having a heart that's right. But sometimes we never flip that switch or kind of go into the submission part, and we got kids graduating from high school just knowing, I know all this stuff I'm not supposed to do, but I don't know why I'm doing the stuff I'm doing. Why do we love David so much? It wasn't that he got everything right. It's because he was always repentant and would come back, and his heart belonged to God.
Yeah.
We sometimes, I believe, get selfish in our determinations of who we are. And when we think about what I want to do, what God wants me to do, we really have to look at whose body is it? Who dwells within me? The temple, the Holy Spirit. So it's not your body. It's God's body. And so, for me, that's a good way of looking at submission. Who am I housing? Not me.
Well, and you get a trickle-down effect with that, too. Because then if I am not mine, then nothing that I have is actually mine. My time isn't, my possessions aren't. And then so, like, submission becomes something that becomes second nature because I'm going to submit to his will, and his will was to make sure everybody was taken care of, to try to love God and love other people. We should put that on a banner. Yes, John?
Mm-hmm.
There's a word that's a lot like submission, and I think it's our bailout word, and that's subjection. And I think a lot of us have, I've grown up feeling like I need to be in subjection to God because he's way better than the other guy. We just read a passage where God told his people to kill everybody. And it's one of the great questions, and I think I'll be not wrestling with it, but I'll always be thoughtful of it, is have I truly decided that God is good? Not is God better. Is God better than the other guy? I've got that. Should I be in subjection to somebody who has all power and is better than the other guy? Sure, that makes sense. But what Daryl just said is that David truly, at his gut level, under all circumstances, decided that God was good. And whatever God wanted him to do was going to be good. Not, hey, God's mad at the Amalekites, but let's get some cows out of the deal, please. David never, at his deepest level, wondered whether God was truly good. And so, even though he wasn't able to do it, he strove to submit, to give his will to God, because God had the best intent for him and for the Israelites and for everything. And that's a hard one. That's a hard one to get, I think, all the way at your gut level.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Awesome. We're running up on time. Skip, did you have one quick thing?
Just to piggyback on what Carol was saying about the kids, maybe that's in a relationship too, not just a parent-child relationship, but with somebody that you choose to marry or whatever, that other person, when they're obeying, but maybe their submission is to their mate or their parents, until that faith becomes their own, and they stop imitating their mate or their parents and start imitating Christ, that submission is not going to be to the right target.
Yeah, so important.
Submission is one of the more difficult topics that we could wrestle with for the next 9 or 12 hours. So, I mean, I'm free for the rest of the day.
Yeah.
We understand, like, this is hard, and what we really want out of this is for you guys to go home and wrestle with this. Submission is hard. Submission is a tough pill to swallow if that's not how you've grown up, and the idea of it is not pretty at first. And then as soon as you understand, as soon as you submit, it's God. Everything is God. All my decisions, my family at home, my family here, there's a change. It switches over. Take some time this week to think about flipping that switch between obedience and submission to God. Also, to submission to your brothers and sisters here, because that's kind of where we're going with all of this. Is as a family unit, we've all got to work together. And you know, I brought up a not so fun topic because sometimes there's not so fun topics in families, in life, and we've got to deal with those. So let's deal with them. Wrestle with that this week. I pray that that's on your heart quite a bit. Anything else for you?
Good. Just I wish I would have been standing up here this whole time. I'm like, this feels really cool.
Yeah.
So I'm not used to this. So anyways, no.
That's all we've got this week. Thank you, guys.
All right, thank you.
We'll do this again next week.
Mm-hmm.